With every year that passes, I don't know if I'm getting stupider or my life is getting harder because everything just seems to get more and more complicated. The amount of emotional, mental, and financial requirements that are needed for me to even make it through and survive just seem to increase exponentially. And therefore, whenever I run into something small that actually has a huge leverage and a huge impact on improving things in my life, I cling on to that for dear life. And these things might be tiny, but their impact and effect on bettering my existence is enormous. And so today I wanted to share 5 things from this year that fall into this category for me, so that hopefully if we are the same type of person, you might also be helped too. So let's get straight into it. The first one is an interesting switch in being more likely to achieve very difficult goals by not focusing on the end result, but by focusing on my rock bottom instead. Let me explain. This is something that I first heard from August Bradley, and then I tried it out and it completely resonated immediately with me and my mentality and psychology. And then I thought, oh my God, this is huge. So I went to the literature to try and confirm it, and you know what? I found things to support it, so let's get straight into it. There's this thing in psychology called the fresh start effect, which is a term coined by Katie Milkman, and it refers to this huge reserve of motivation, energy, passion, hope that we have for the future when we realize that we have turned a fresh page or we have a fresh slate. And this starting from scratch or fresh start means that we are much more motivated to do something than we were before. We distance ourselves from the negative things that we did in the past, and we are hopeful and motivated to move forward. And this is not something to be scoffed at, because as someone who relies mainly on my motivation to do all of my work, basically, any source of huge motivation that I can find is really, really helpful. The perspective shift here is that I used to be very focused on my end goals or the things that I wanted to achieve, because I feel like this kind of future planning and vision boards and all of these things are great, and I used to resonate with a lot of them. But the issue is that they can actually dampen my motivation. Looking at an action that I want to achieve in the future will actually fill me more with doubt, with the thought of, I can do this later, can I actually do it? Is it really essential for me to do this now? And it's a huge dampener on my desire to take action in the moment. While rock bottom is a great place to be highly motivated. You might have realized this, for example, when you look around your messy room that's a complete dump and you go, oh my God, I need to do something about this right now. And suddenly you're pulling up your sleeves and you're doing crazy amounts of intense cleaning. This is a huge motivation to organize things compared to coming into your freshly cleaned room and just throwing your sweater in the bed and not bothering to put it in the closet. Or for example, when you realize that you got a really bad grade in university and you go, oh, this is kind of rock bottom for me, so I'm going to start studying. This state of rock bottom has huge amounts of motivation, and therefore it's really helpful to rely on it to get things done. The view here is that if we want to achieve this future goal, which is quite far away, it's much more helpful not to look at the gap between where we are and the result, but actually to look at our bare minimum and keep raising our bare minimum until it reaches our current level. So for example, if I decide that my bare minimum is being able to bench press 20 kilograms, my friends respecting certain boundaries, then I can immediately achieve these goals and remove anything that doesn't fit them. Once I'm there, I can raise my bare minimum level again to increase in the things that I want to achieve. And by doing this, we still get to the same level of achieving our goals eventually in the future, but we are doing this by using this increased level of passion and motivation and freshness and distance from things that we didn't want in the past, rather than focused on that scary thing, which is a future goal. And so I really think that this slight mindset shift really helps, especially in those squishier fields of life like friendships and relationships and communication and interaction. Raising our bare minimum standards for what we accept there can mean that our life very, very quickly can look a lot nicer, cleaner, healthier, and more inspiring. So I really recommend it. The second huge leverage change that I've made this year is using to-do lists that work for me. Now, I've had a very love-hate relationship with to-do lists, because in the past I used to be very compulsive, as in I would not sleep unless I ticked everything off, which is really unhealthy. So for about 2 years now, I have not used to-do lists at all, and I've only done work intuitively, which I think is the best state to be, and still 90% of the time I do this. But in those moments that I've overwhelmed, I found that there's a to-do list style that genuinely works for me, and I'm going to share it with you. What I currently do is I take a piece of paper on a day where I have way too much to do, and I divide it into 2 columns. On one side, I put a to-do list. On the other side, I put a don't do list. In my to-do list, I will write everything, answer a text, apply for a new passport, things that I don't even need to do that day, but are kind of a brain dump on things that I need to do that week or that month. And I will just list them in no particular order. And on the don't do list, this is really important, I will put things that I do not want to do that day. So for example, I'll go check Instagram Reels, which is just a really stress increasing waste of time in like my life. And I'll put things like don't skip gym. It might be don't not do the thing that's on the to-do list, but there'll be a few things there that I just don't want to do that day. And I'll look at this and I'll just tick off as many as I can. And in this way, I can, one, tick off avoiding things that I don't want to do. And also I can kind of refresh my memory on things that I need to do in the future. And also I've just kind of told myself to not be a little, and basically if there is something that's not done on my to-do list, that's absolutely fine. So I find this to-do list and don't do list really, really helpful. And if you start it, you might find that you have more items on your don't do list, because if it's a time of your life where you're kind of doing activities that you don't enjoy, that's absolutely fine. But as you progress through this, it might just end up being 1 or 2 items in your don't do list. And that's absolutely great. It means you're probably intuitively living the kind of life that you want. But yeah, this has been massively helpful. Third thing is quite controversial, but this year I've genuinely been working so much more on my strengths and ignoring almost and not working on my weaknesses. Let me explain. There's a lot of caveats to this, but basically the more time I spend in hospital and in medicine, the more I'm convinced that this is true. And this is a view that if there is something that other people or the average person does easily without effort, doesn't even need to think of doing, and this same activity you have been trying really, really hard actively to achieve, but somehow you're really struggling and underperforming, it's probably not your fault. There's probably something else that's the matter here. And I'm not going to get into labels and things because I don't think they're necessarily important right now, but I just categorize all these things as weaknesses. And these are things that you've probably been told that you're not working hard enough on, or things that you just feel guilty and hide or need to work too hard to achieve the bare minimum. These might be your weaknesses. For me, this might be things like remembering things, remembering names, remembering people, remembering things that I need to do, focusing in general, being consistent, sticking to my habits. These all go into my weaknesses. What I've realized is that the amount of energy, focus, time and misery that I would need to invest into all of these weakness skills in order to make them average is just insane and ridiculous. It'll be a complete waste. And at best, I'll probably be average. And especially if you're a bit older, you kind of know intuitively what you hate doing because you're bad at it and what you enjoy doing because you're naturally good at it. And so I say that all of these skills, I'm just going to scrape by. I'm literally going to scrape by. These are my weaknesses. I'm just going to be functioning in all of these skills, which takes some energy, but not too much. And instead, all of this other energy and motivation, I'm going to invest it in things that I enjoy doing, in my strengths and things that I am good at. And what that means is, very often, a strength is, to me, is defined as something that the more I do that activity, not only the better I am at it and the better I'm recognized for it, but the more energy I get. It's kind of not a sink, it's an inspiring and it's a virtuous circle of things. And as I improve my strengths, they also tend to compensate for my weaknesses while I don't need to focus on them at all. Relevant to this is also the psychological term of fundamental attribution error, which refers to the fact that in Western or individualistic societies, it's very, very common for people to feel that they are solely consciously responsible for what they do and what happens to them, which is at contrast with other more group-based societies. And therefore, I like to remind myself that it might be a function of the way that I was raised and where I was born to say that it is my fault if I am performing really badly in something, rather than saying there might be other factors at play here. So not to remove complete responsibility, but to say that there are places where I can invest my energy better. So this is massively helpful. Number 4, and I'll try not to make this too wishy-washy because it has to do with psychology, but one of the biggest leverage things that I have experienced in my life is building a strong sense of eternal self rather than being fully reactive to my environment. So having a very good ability to recognize what you're feeling, who you are and what you want is absolutely essential. And if right now you're watching and you're thinking, well, you know, everyone knows that. No, you're just healthy. Not everyone knows that. I definitely didn't know that. And being highly reactive means that I was very often at the mercy of my environment. If someone said something bad or if I was in a stressful situation, I would experience this very, very strongly and my emotions and mood kind of fluctuate a significant bit, and I would be quite distressed on the inside, even if I never actually showed this on the outside. And the issue here is that I had nothing strong to fall back upon. Very often when I was feeling bad, I would just label it as anxiety, and I wouldn't really know what I was experiencing and what I needed to make myself feel better, because I had no clue of who I was and what I wanted beyond what I was told I should want and who I was. So this was just not helpful. And if there's any part of you that thinks that it is selfish to focus on yourself and to vocalize your needs and to say all of these things, my current view on this is that it's much more selfish to and irresponsible to be the sort of person that's completely incapacitated sometimes by very basic interactions and social situations because they have these issues that they haven't resolved within themselves. So I would say if you do have the time and space to do this, there's a lot of self-work that can already be done. I would definitely recommend Dr. Konda online. That's a free resource that's really helpful, but I have also a very in-depth video that I'll link somewhere if you're into this kind of thing and into my perspective. But having a very strong sense of who you are, what you're feeling and what you want will also lessen your anxiety overall, therefore allowing you to be more productive and experience things in a more positive way, but also attract healthier people and healthier connections with them, which then leads to a happier life overall and basically covers us on all bases of what we should want during our existence. So yeah, so from that very philosophical point, I'm going to go on to my last high leverage change, which has been drafting. Now, I am a very instinctive, impulsive and compulsive person. If you relate to any of these, you probably know the feeling of needing to solve problems immediately on the spot. If something comes to my mind, like what should my relationship with this person be, or what should I study, what career should I have, where should I live, what should I do, I need to resolve that anxiety immediately. I cannot let it rest and just focus on anything else. And this becomes very, very distractive and counterproductive. And this is something I've struggled with my whole life. It leads to a lot of rash decisions, saying the wrong things, ruining friendships or relationships or jobs or anything, because I just need to lessen and find a resolution to something even though I don't have enough information. And previously being just told to slow down, wait, resolve it later just never worked. But this very slight mindset shift that I use now is to think that I can create a draft right now, but I can create future drafts and future conclusions. And this basically means I'm doing the exact same thing. I'm coming to a conclusion, but I'm referring to it as a draft. And once I think that it's a draft, I can go, okay, do I want to share this with the other involved parties or people, or do I just keep this to myself and wait for a future time? Because I've technically come up with a solution, but I'm also recognizing that it might not be the final thing. And this has been almost an immediate cure to a lot of things for me, of thinking this is a draft. I don't need to finish it. And we take it to the extreme in the book Life Span. David Sinclair talks about how in the future the world will actually have capacity for an infinite amount of people who will be infinitely happy because our knowledge will increase so much that we will be able to do basically anything. And this might be a bit extreme, but in the short term, I think we can all appreciate that the future version of ourselves will have knowledge and data that will come up with better solutions than we currently have. So if you're very compulsive and you want to do something to affect a situation immediately, do that in your own mind, consider it a draft. Close that chapter and then reapproach it when you're more comfortable in the future. And lastly, talking about high leverage things in STEM fields, I feel it's essential to mention logic and reasoning as a core part of being able to cope with society, our thoughts, our emotions, and our jobs and the things that we do, and be able to perform highly in all of these. Currently, the best thing that I have seen for testing and learning in this direction is Brilliant, which are very kindly sponsoring this video. Brilliant is both an online platform and an app that you can use to improve your logical reasoning through exercises and lessons in various different STEM subjects. My favorites are logic and mathematics fundamentals because I feel that these are things that just underline the core of everything that we do in life and have huge leverage in improving our ability to attain information, understand and critically consider things that are happening in our lives. Especially for STEM students, I would really recommend having a look at it. I will have a link in my description that will give you a free trial to see exactly what I'm talking about, but also will give you 20% off the yearly subscription. The link is brilliant.org/Elizabeth Phillips. If it doesn't resonate with you, that's great. And if it does resonate with you, that's also great. But I would definitely just give it a look and see if it's a good fit. But otherwise, if you made it to the end of this video, thank you so much for spending this time with me. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day and don't believe everything you think. Thanks. Bye.